Also, he heals. Oh my god. So, to reiterate, 3% chance. You know, I spent 12 hours getting that. First time I run into him while streaming, I get him first try.
Mega Man Battle Network. This is a game that I was pretty excited to see a compilation come out on. And that might be surprising to some people, because I look at these legacy collections with nothing but cynicism and disdain, honestly. Like, I love Mega Man, but these legacy collections I just see as lazy cash-ins. Chief problems. To get the legacy collections, you have to buy them twice for some reason. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago, you could just buy the Anniversary Collection and the X Collection and get the same content plus more for less than half price, and you only make one purchase. The fact that these legacy collections don't actually show the entire legacy of the series they're trying to talk about. Like, I'm not expecting Capcom to go out of their way to translate Super Adventure Rockman just for me, but on the other hand, they also did go out of the way to translate Rockman Battle and Chase for the X Collection on the GameCube, so yeah, they used to just flat out have more effort put into these things at a lesser cost, and you didn't have to buy it twice. But like, what about the Game Boy games, you know? Those were important interstitial games that set up the next one. No? Still not getting those in any collection, huh? Great, great, great. And for whatever reason, they are still insistent on giving us the worst versions of everything. Why is it that we still haven't gotten a re-release of the canonical version of Mega Man 8? You know, the one with 2 extra bosses, extra content, the one that actually completes story hooks set up in the 7th game if you were paying attention? No, instead we get the bad PlayStation version with the worst music and less content. Awesome. My point is that I don't like these legacy collections or what they stand for how lazy they are and how much money they make, but it is nice that people actually get to explore at least a small bit of the legacy of these games, even if it is just blindly corporate cynicism that drives them. But I was actually kind of excited for this one. So much so that I started doing weekly Mega Man streams to build up to this, which is actually why I've done Mega Man Legends, Legends 2, Misadventure of Tron Bonne, which I've got a review that I'm going to record directly after this, so look forward to that, as well as a knockoff Game Boy Mega Man game, which is way better than it has any right to be. The fact is, I am the biggest Battle Network nerd you will ever find. I still own a physical battle chip. I have a boxed copy of 3 and a sealed copy of 6. I love this series. When I first was introduced to Mega Man Battle Network, I think it was on IGN way back in the day when they first announced it. They had like a trailer from like Tokyo Game Show or something. It was entirely in Japanese, and I think it was like 30 seconds long. I watched it and I was enamored with it. I then proceeded to rewatch it 13 more times. And then every single day, from the moment that trailer launched to the moment that game came out, I watched it about 20 more times. I was just in love with this. It was Mega Man, one of my favorite series of all time, in an action RPG, my favorite genre of all time. And to make it even more special, it was like the first time I'd ever really experienced a deck builder, because I don't really have all that much of a passion in card games. In fact, had this game been pitched to me as effectively a card game, I probably wouldn't have played it. But the fact that it was pitched as an action RPG with interesting strategy elements and planning, I was in on that so hard, and I love this series. Wasn't a perfect series, and we'll talk about that when I finally get through streaming, you know, the others, especially 4. Oh god, that one's bad. Battle Chip Challenge, that was not even a game. 4.5 was just weird and bad. Look, it's not a perfect series. But the first game was a very, very good game, and I am very interested in this, and I have a very long history with this game. But even when I first played this, I could tell you this was not a perfect game. It felt lacking in something, and having played this again, I can reaffirm those beliefs. But it's still a great game that's absolutely worth your time, especially if you've never played this and you have any interest in Mega Man, because it really was a very interesting experimental branch in the series. Heck, I watched the Mega Man Battle Network anime, like all of it, and I can tell you, with the exception of that one episode where they turned Roll into a dominatrix for some reason, it was a total waste of time. And it wasn't remotely Battle Network. And that's not how you pronounce Show's name, because literally nothing on the planet is pronounced Chod. But the point is, for one episode, Roll was really unbelievably sexy. No, I'm sorry, the point is Mega Man Battle Network is actually quite good. And for one episode, Roll was really unbelievably sexy. Now, the story to Mega Man Battle Network, strangely enough, doesn't actually star Mega Man. At least, not directly. The plot itself follows a young 4th grader named Lan Hikari. Like any other 4th grader, is equipped with a PET, or pet. The E in this acronym always changes between games, but the short version is that the P stands for personal, the T stands for terminal. I believe in this game the E stands for exploration. It's sort of kind of like a cell phone. In fact, it does actually accept phone calls and do email, which, you know, it's pretty advanced technology considering when this game came out. This game basically predicted the future, and that's kind of cool. Except that email is shown to be a thing that has to be, like, physically connected to the internet so that, like, physical programs can actually, like, physically hand them off in a digital space. Except that your pet always can just accept emails, in spite of it not being connected to the internet, so that you can't actually receive them. There's a few glaring weird inconsistencies with this game. I'll talk about that when I get a chance. But each pet is equipped with a Net Navi, short for Network Navigator. These are effectively little AI friends and companions based on robot masters, for some reason. Lan's particular Net Navi is Mega Man EXE. Mega Man sort of is just an extension of Lan in this game, whereas Lan feels like more the direct protagonist. The story itself is actually kind of interesting because now you have to pilot 2 characters around in 2 separate worlds. Lan in the physical world, whereas you pilot Mega Man around in the digital world to solve problems. Lan can't open a door with a digital lock, so Mega Man would have to jack into the machine to unlock the door for him. Whereas Mega Man can't figure out how many physical things are in a world, so Lan has to go count them because there's an entire chapter dedicated to math. It's an interesting concept to see basically 2 worlds being utilized in tandem to solve problems, all to ultimately overthrow the horrible machinations of World 3, this terrorist organization that is led by actual Dr. Wily. I'm pretty sure this game takes place like well after like the ZX games, so I guess he really was Vile and then like Model W and he just sort of revived as a human again, I guess. Either way, it's Lan, Mega Man, and their friends and classmates, Dex and his partner Gutsman, Male with Roll, Yai with her partner Glide, who I guess is based off that Mega Man Legends character and nothing else, who you never see in combat or actually get to utilize in combat across any of the games. Seriously, he's basically just a made-up character that never gets utilized in any of these games. As well as Lan's soon-to-be absolute bestest buddy ever, Eugene Sho, and his partner Protoman, which makes him my hero, must work together to overwhelm and overthrow the terrorist organization World 3. The plot is actually quite interesting. I like that you have to utilize 2 characters in tandem, and it shows both a digital world and a physical world, and how they kind of interact with each other and how effects in one ultimately have ripples in the other. I love everything about this. However, there are a lot of issues with the plot, and not just because email seems to be bizarrely inconsistent. Indeed, there's a lot of things about this plot that just don't seem to make a lot of sense. For example, World 3's ultimate global domination plan is to gather 4 specific elemental coded programs to create a super mega virus. And the thing is, each of these chapters is dedicated to basically one of these programs and trying to protect them and stop World 3 from doing their dastardly deeds and all that. There's just some things about this that make straight up no sense, or can easily be picked apart. For example, they actively even say in the plot that World 3 never actually got the program that's dedicated to the wood element. But by the end they have it, in spite of the fact that they've actively said they bungled that one. And without spoiling too much, the electric program that they got, that was a sting operation with a fake program. But it works well enough, I guess. One of the most baffling ones is the very first chapter, which is dedicated to the fire program, however. See, it's the first chapter, so I'm okay with spoiling it. Basically, this random guy comes to your house and starts fixing your thermostat, and then your oven gets messed up. Somehow that happens. I don't know how those 2 things are connected. But the idea is that your oven specifically contains the fire program. But like, why? Is it Lan's specific oven? Could any oven work? Why did World 3 need to go to this one house to get this one oven? And they've proven that they've gone to other ovens and that there have been like a rash of fires because of this. So this is hardly the first time they've done this. Have they just screwed up so badly that the others didn't count? Why not go to a junkyard and just get a junked oven? Why not go to a used electronic shop, buy a used one. Why not, since this is a terrorist organization with a lot of money here, why don't they actually just like repair this stuff if they actually need to go into someone's house, repair the thing and take the program or put in a false program? Why do they need to cause this? Why not go like stealth mode until they're ready to make their big move? It makes absolutely zero sense that they need to grab this specific program from this specific oven in this specific house that all just happens to coincide with where Mega Man hangs out, you know? It's just preposterously convenient. And the thing is, all of this has an issue in the fact that this game is awful in its translation, okay? There's actually a really cool subplot that goes on with this game that gets spelled out to you pretty much right before the final boss, but the thing is, as opposed to it being like a little thing that you could, you know, pick up hints and bits and pieces to understand what this plot is before they tell it to you, it kind of just comes out of nowhere because the little hints and stuff are just so badly translated with everything else in this game. You'll see people saying U and R using the letters U and R. Things get abbreviated awkwardly. And sure, in combat, sometimes that makes sense because you have a limited amount of space on your battle chips to, you know, give a definition, fine, but entire text boxes are just mangled. Later, when you get into the internet, the latter half of the internet is actually like blocked off section by section dependent on how you complete specific challenges. And one of them, the person who tells you what the challenge is completely incoherent. All he says is, results, they're important. Get a lot of them. What does that mean? I streamed this and was totally lost as to what I was supposed to do in this part of the world. Like, does it mean I have to win battles? Does it mean I need specific chips from battles? How many? What is on the table here? It's entirely unclear. There's a lot of really goofy dialogue that was basically 1.0 YouTube meme-worthy. Load Show is quite famous from this game because of it. There's just an awful translation to this game that could have been fixed if anyone wanted to put effort into this collection. But again, this just leads to these legacy collections kind of being a cheap, cynical cash-in more than anything, although they did at least add some stuff that was only available in Japan, so that's nice. But still, there's a lot of things that could have been improved about this translation, and it's just mangled, and half the plot makes no sense because of the way they've translated it in this game. It's awful. The core ideas and the actual plot itself are quite cool, and there's some really neat little, like, side stories and background details here that really create a really interesting and all culminating to some really cool events at the end, but they pretty much just get completely garbled in the mistranslation leading up to it. And that's a damn shame. And unfortunately, from what I remember, most of the Battle Network games have this issue. And while this is the only one in the Legacy Collection I've played thus far, I'm betting they haven't been fixed either. Now, like I said, you control two characters in this game, and it's controlling them in tandem that ultimately will allow you to solve this game's problems. Because of that, it creates an interesting dual world system where both characters play somewhat asynchronously in terms of what they're capable of doing. As Len, you can run around the overworld, talk to various NPCs, advance the plot, and just in general be a grade 4 elementary schooler who gets in way too much trouble and starts fighting terrorists because reasons. You can also press L to get handy tips for Mega Man. You can also do this as Mega Man to get tips from Len. He will also comment on whatever piece of electronics you're currently occupying, which is kind of a neat little piece of detail, although this mainly exists to give you hints if you're lost and have no idea where to go, which with this game's translation is kind of necessary. If you find a piece of electronic equipment that you want to closer inspect, you can press R to jack in. Their words, not mine, and basically just plug Mega Man into it so he can explore whatever electronic device you want to look at. This can be anything as small as a teddy bear that for some reason has an electronic port to your school desk to any computer connected to the internet. And if you connect to the internet, you can explore a greater world as Mega Man. Weirdly enough, entire chunks of this internet are completely locked off unless you happen to be friends with like 4 different random shopkeepers. Like just, there are quarters of the internet you just can't get to unless you're friends with these shopkeepers. There's no way of getting in beyond the barriers they've set up with those internet locks. Basically, for some reason, 4 random shopkeepers own the keys to the internet. And that makes zero sense. At least with the World 3, like, locked off areas, you could say that's like private servers and stuff, but these guys are actively holding chunks of the internet hostage. Chunks of the internet that already have other navis and shopkeepers and NPCs in it. Are they all friends with these random shopkeepers? Because there's no other entrance point here. Also, sometimes you have to do random missions to unlock various doors to get further into the internet, and they're poorly explained, and there's not really any precedent as to why you would have to do this, but it's a thing that you had to do in this game. While you're running around the electronic world as Mega Man, you will encounter random encounters. And then suddenly the game turns into an action RPG / deck building game. This is where things get really interesting, and this is where the real meat and potatoes of the game actually lies. In the combat screen, the combat itself is rather peculiar because it's both real-time but also turn-based. Sort of. At the start of a fight, you are given access to a hand of 5 cards. These are known as battle chips. These battle chips are randomized from a folder of 30 that you can completely customize, with the only rule that I can remember being you can only have 5 net navi chips. Spoilers, you stone man. He's unbelievably good. But anyway, now you can't necessarily use all 5 battle chips at once. It is a random pull of 5 from your folder. However, each battle chip has to have connecting attributes to other chips you use at the same time. For example, if you had 5 chips that were the exact same, i.e. 5 cannon chips, you could use them because they are all the exact same battle chip. That is a perfectly valid hand. Conversely, if they have the same battle chip code, a letter that designates what this individual chip represents, you can connect those codes together. For example, if you had sword A, cannon A, shotgun A, heal A, those are mostly not battle chips available in those codes, but for the sake of the argument, as long as they contain that same code, that is also a perfectly valid hand. You can also choose to skip this hand and request 5 additional battle chips for the next hand, allowing you to have a greater pool if you want to survive a turn without battle chips. That's an option. Or you can take them into battle. Once the battle begins, there's a little gauge at the top of the screen. This is effectively a turned timer. Once that maxes out, you can press L or R to activate another pause in the battle to look at your next pool of cards. Any chips that weren't used before will remain there, so it's not like you're drawing a completely random new set of 5 cards or anything, but if you had 2 battle chips you needed for something in your initial hand, you could take the remaining 3, wait till the next turn, and they'll still be there waiting for you for whatever plan you're setting up. And indeed, there's a point to doing that, because if you get a certain group of battle chips together, they can actually fuse together to create an ultimate move called Program Advance. This is a super move where those chips fuse together and do a lot of damage, basically. There are, I believe, 30 in the game, and this is where the core of deck building really happens, because you're either building a deck around a singular chip or code in order to have as many combat options as possible per turn, or you're building it around combinations of program advances and ways to ultimately utilize your chips in the most meaningful way. Your initial folder is completely full of just random nonsense. There are a lot of repeated chips, which means you can use more than 1 per turn, which is nice, but you'll rarely ever get to use 3 or 4. By the end of the game, I was using a folder that contained 24 chips with the B code that allowed me access to no less than 3 different program advances, plus I could use a full hand of cards at any time. I also had 4 chips that used the S code because they were all Stone Man and he's unbelievably powerful, and Base, which is F code, because they added that and that was a Japanese exclusive, and that was like the one thing they actually added to this game in this compilation. That's really the only legwork they actually bothered putting in. But to be fair, it was a cool thing we didn't have before, and it's unbelievably OP, so it's great. Now, once you actually start the combat itself, you and enemies run around 3x3 grids on each side of the screen, although that can be modified. And indeed, one of the greatest strategies you can utilize in this game, and the enemy will certainly utilize, is controlling your enemy's environment, either by utilizing chips that take a large amount of area away from them because they become damage zones, or by actively stealing or destroying enemy tiles, giving them limited mobility. This is one of the greatest strategies you can employ in this game, of course, because hampering mobility is ultimately one of the greatest powers you can utilize. You can also utilize Navi chips, which are battle chips centered around net navis that pause the game and do a lot of damage. They each have unique effects, some significantly better than others, like Stone Man. Seriously, get Stone Man, he's the only one worth using. But ultimately, it's the combination of chips, navis, your ability to control your opponent's environment, and your opponent's own strengths that you have to work around in order to achieve victory. If you manage to reduce a virus's health to 0, you'll then be given a results screen. This will give you your Buster rank. Numbers 1 through 10 plus S rank, S is like 11 for the sake of this argument, Although 10 is a weirdly hard to get number, you're either getting S or 9 if you're really doing that well. Depending on your rank, you can get Zenny, the game's currency, or battle chips, your combat cards. It's a good system, it's rewarding, it means that every fight can have meaningful consequences and benefits to you. However, some of it is straight up broken. There is 176 battle chips in this game, if you include the special downloadable base chip that they added for this version that was originally a special event thing, but some of the battle chips and the way they're designed to drop is just, I don't know if there's a bug in the game or they just weren't thinking when they made this, but some battle chips feel like they're designed to functionally not drop. When I went to the Game Facts board, I saw a Reddit post about one specific battle chip, and trust me, there's at least 2 here that will drive you up the wall if you want a complete collection. Those 2 are Howitzer and Drop Down. These are obnoxious battle chips to get because when you're in a fight with these specific viruses that drop them, they are viruses that are designed to stall fights. Both, through their own mechanics, are designed to effectively be invulnerable for 5 seconds. And within that 5 seconds, you have lost about 3 ranks of Buster rank, just in how long a fight has gone. Seriously, you have to clear fights real fast if you want good ranks in this game. And the thing is, if you act fast enough, and I'm talking like by milliseconds here, you might get a 9 rank. If you're lucky. It's very rarely ever guaranteed. And the thing is, the battle chips for Howitzer and Drop Down. Now, I read from a guide specifically, but if you get an S rank on either the Howitzer battle chip virus or the Drop Down chip virus, you have a 50% chance of getting either of those battle chips. A rank 10, that drops to 25%. If you get a 9, which is the lowest you can go to get these chips, you have a mighty 3% chance of getting them. And bear in mind, these are with viruses that will bleed about 3 ranks from you, just because of how long it takes for their fight to actually start, because they're otherwise invulnerable until that point. And the only way to try and raise the rank higher than that is if you're fighting them along with another virus and you can kill them together with one battle chip, which is certainly doable, but you need a battle chip that can actually do that kind of damage, hit that kind of area to hit both viruses, and oh yeah, most crucially, you need to actually get into a fight where there are multiple viruses, where you can even do that because there are encounters that won't let you. In the most optimal circumstances, you basically have a 3% chance of getting either of these battle chips, and what really, really sucks about it, because there are gacha machines where you trade in a bunch of battle chips to get a random one, you could theoretically get those 2 chips from that gacha machine, but there'll be a different code. The code you need from those drops is exclusive to those drops if they are dropped. And you need those codes specifically because they're used for in-game trade. You'll notice he wants a lot of chips. Trade. Boom. Hero Sword B, the best battle chip. In the case of Howitzer, it gives you a one-of-a-kind battle chip. And in the case of Drop Down, it gives you a one-of-a-kind coded chip that you need specifically for a certain program advance. Basically, outside of gacha for collecting that one-of-a-kind battle chip, you cannot get it. So you won't be able to complete your library. And there is no way to get that coded chip for that program advance outside of trading that specific 3% drop chip. Basically, some of the drops in this game are designed to not work, and it's just awful. Like I said, there's an entire Reddit thread designed about just figuring out how to give yourself optimal chances for a 50% shot at getting dropped down. And even then, there's no guarantees. I 100% this game at 37 hours, 37 minutes. That's a happy coincidence. And I can tell you, 12 of those hours was just grinding Drop Down, and another 5 was grinding Howitzer. And the saddest thing of all is once I finally got Drop Down, I decided to stream, and I got one the first time I ran into one of those guys. And then when I was playing Cleanup just to finish 100%ing it, I got another one. Just random happenstance. That's probability for you. Stone Man will teach you that too. But either way, some of the battle chip drops, while I appreciate how rewarding getting battle chips from fights are, some of the fights just feel like they're not designed to actually give you the chips, but the game still requires you, if you want 100%, to get them specifically. And there's not really any other way of getting them. Not reliably, certainly. And that's awful. If you run out of battle chips, or you just want to use it for some reason, Mega Man is once again equipped with the Mega Buster. However, it's a little bit weird in this game. It starts out by doing 1 damage, which isn't all that impressive. You can level it up by using customizable power-up programs that allow you to add stats to either your attack, your rapid fire, or your charge. Although, weirdly enough, charge takes, I think, like 2 upgrades to actually allow you to start charging your buster. So if you're going to use your charge ability, and charge is one of the most effective things you can do with your buster, start investing your upgrades into that. You can also upgrade Mega Man's health with health upgrades. as well as get elemental armors that will mostly be completely ignored. These are weird and overly expensive, but effectively you can go into Mega Man's stats and apply one of 3 elemental armors. Weirdly enough, electricity doesn't get an armor associated with it for some reason, and these armors allow you to have the damage of the element associated with them. So if you have fire armor, then fire damage is half. But on the flippity flop, you will take double damage from water because fire is weak to water because there's a rock, paper, scissors elemental damage system. It's weird that they don't give you a full set of 4 armors, and it's a very cumbersome, clunky system to go into the menu and bother to do this. And the thing is, the only time I ever really felt like I should maybe need armor is against navies, because navies are effectively bosses. They're the hard fights. But most of the navies are non-element to begin with, so none of this armor will actually do anything to them. At least by and large. There's a couple. Iceman, Fireman, Woodman. I think that's it. The rest are all non-element, and that's more than half of them. So the whole elemental armor, it's clunky, it's clumsy, it's cumbersome, and it doesn't really work. And weirdly enough, when you combine this with the health ups and the buster upgrades, it creates a weird leveling system for Mega Man that, as far as I can tell, only gets brought up in-game in the penultimate chapter, which is entirely a chapter of filler. It's the only chapter that doesn't have a dungeon. You just wander around the internet and talk to some people. It's, weirdly enough, there's a filler chapter in the 6th chapter game. It's very bizarre, but there's a lot of power checks in there just to make sure Mega Man's leveled to X amount of points. That and one boss only shows up if you have a certain amount of levels under Mega Man, but otherwise the leveling system is entirely pointless. And it's been a while since I played the others, but I'm pretty sure they kind of axe all of that. I mean, there's still buster upgrades and health upgrades, but yeah, there's no leveling or anything after this, and yeah, it's clunky, it's cumbersome, and it just doesn't work. And indeed, that's kind of my biggest gripe about gameplay, and really the only issue I had with this game growing up, aside from the translation, is everything about this just feels very clunky and more like they just wanted to see if they could do this more than this was what they intended to do. I'm probably going to say this again by the end, but this whole game feels more like a proof of concept than an actual game itself, and it just makes way for a game to improve upon it. And indeed, it would be improved upon greatly in the next 2 sequels, and then go down a sharp cliff of quality after that. But I will say that while it is clunky and cumbersome, I mean, you can't even use battleships one after the other. There's like a 1.5-second delay between them, which sucks. It still plays relatively well, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. Now, the overall presentation to Mega Man Battle Network is kind of like the rest of the game. It's a bit rough around the edges, a bit jank, but overall quite good. All of the net navies look awesome, I'm just gonna say it. In fact, while characters like Iceman and Bombman look basically like their original Robot Masters, I honestly think that characters like Fireman and Elecman, maybe even Stoneman, look significantly better than their Robot Master equivalents. There's just something about them that, to me, feels far more definitive in their design. Like, they know what they want to be in their appearance, and definitely making more of a statement with who they are. They're a lot more stylized and complicated, certainly, than the initial Robot Master designs. And I think that extra level of detail does help give the character designs of Battle Network far more of a unique flair than, say, the original designs, or, something from Mega Man Legends, which had more of a, skeletal look for the most part. Skullman in this game looks freaking awesome, saying skeletal out loud. I love Skullman in this game. That is the definitive Skullman right there. My point is that navies, they look cool. Base's new design with his giant finned helmet looks amazing. Protoman looks awesome. The only thing he's missing is his classic bandana. And of course, Mega Man just looks cool. I love all these characters. I would love to follow their adventures. Unfortunately, we only get to follow Mega Man, but he looks great as well. The battle chips have cool little images on them, although I will say that blown up on a big screen now, they look pretty awful. Like, they're just visually very garbled. And the most frustrating thing about it is I know that they updated the imagery to these. You just don't get to see them in-game. You get to see them on the trade menu that no one bothers using because it's Battle Network 1 and I don't think anyone's using it to trade anything. But yeah, there's just nicer images of the battle chips in here, but you don't get to see them in-game and they're a little bit visually garbled. But still, they're good. You get a sense of the viruses that drop them, the characters that they represent. It's just a shame that there are better ones out there that we don't get to see. The viruses themselves are full of personality and quite cool. Once again, we get the classic Mets that have been around since Mega Man 1, but then we have characters like the fishes that shoot little arrows. You don't get names for these characters in this game. That gets added following in Battle Network 2, I think. But all the characters have really unique designs, and they're very, very cool. The programs, the evil programs, because there are evil program spoilers, they're basically zombie, floating robot bunny things missing an ear, and they are freaking terrifying looking. Plus, you first find them by talking to a regular program that you realize is evil. It's like, what? This isn't how this is supposed to go. It's awesome. Seriously, viruses, navies, they look great. The humans look fine. I appreciate that Show's hair design is to actually reference the original Protoman's visor on his helmet. That's a nice little design touch. Lan's design is quite cool as well, although, you know, giving him rollerblades definitely feels like a very late 90s, early 2000s thing, and it definitely is. However, while that's all positive, the environments do suffer a fair bit. While the physical world is perfectly fine with lots of unique areas, I will say that the city design is just confusingly laid out, and it's not really a hard to follow environment. It's like 5 squares, but the way it's laid out and the fact that you have to wait for traffic signals and stuff, it kind of gets a little hard to follow where you are and where you need to go, at least initially, even though it's such a small environment because everything looks kind of the same. The real issue comes from the digital world, however, because the internet, all like 16 maps of it, all look identical. They all have the same Internet Explorer logo floating around in the background. They all have the same tile set for when you fight enemies. They have the same looking roads. The isometric perspective actually makes it really hard to follow some of this stuff, which isn't fantastic. And really, it just gets very, very dull and boring, and it's hard to really discern where you are because everything looks the same. The smaller electronic devices you can jack into, they all have the exact same layout. They're all the exact same square. They have the exact same background, the exact same tile set. It's very, very boring, with the exception of the dungeons and the individual home pages each of the kids have on their computers. All the internet basically looks identical, and that sucks, because you can also see that they actually put a lot of effort into this. If you go to the Waterworks dungeon, you can see that all the different maps in that dungeon actually have completely different backgrounds, and they're animated, and that's actually quite cool. Effort was put in here. It's just weird. It was weirdly disproportionate in places, especially considering you spend the majority of time in one place that all looks the same. The soundtrack is absolutely tremendous, though. The theme song to this game will be seared into my brain for the rest of my life, and I am okay with that. The battle theme is tremendous. The sort of subtle, just chill electronic jam of the internet, it's quite good. I love the soundtrack to this game. It's not super noteworthy outside of its main theme song, but it's inoffensive and really well produced. Overall, the presentation does have some serious hiccups, but again, like the gameplay, rough around the edges, but overall very, very positive. Now, if you want a copy of Mega Man Battle Network on the GBA, cheapest copy I can see right now, which is kind of hard, considering that everything is listed under Battle Network, and there were a lot of these games. Cheapest original Battle Network that I see in English is a UK copy going for $75, which, wow, that's impressive. I have to say, I think these were about $40 brand new back in the day, and to double in price, that's respectable. The rest of the games in the series seem to have held their price and kind of sat at their launch price as well, so, you know, it hasn't gone insanely expensive, but it seems like this one's at least trending upwards. You can also get the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1, or the combo that contains both of them, and then you'll get the other 5 games, but not the rest of the Legacy Collection, because let's be honest, they don't have the best version of 5, they don't have the crossover, they don't have Battle Chip Challenge, Network Transmission, 4.5, any of the mobile games. I think there was 2 Wonder Swan games as well. My point is, it's not a complete Legacy Collection, Capcom, and I have to buy it twice for all the games we do get, and we're still not getting the best version. I'm sorry, I don't like these Legacy Collections for how they stand from a corporate perspective, because from a consumer perspective, it's nice people can play these games, and it's nice they don't have to spend an arm and a leg, but it's not exactly what it says on the tin, and that bugs me. But this game is good. I will say, however, that to echo my thoughts when I was first playing this all the way back when, it feels like this game is missing something. And it is. It's missing polish. This game feels like a proof of concept for a game that would later be made, and that game is, of course, Battle Network 2 and 3. And while I think it would be easy to just say go play 2 or 3, if you ever went back to this, you would feel just how clunky and clumsy and rough around the edges it is, and it would be a lot harder to get into. And by starting with 2 and 3, you kind of miss up the story beats that this game sets up as well, so it's kind of hard to recommend doing that specifically. But if you get the collection, or at least like the first half of the collection, because again, shaking my fist angrily in the air, you get all 3, and you'll be able to play them in order. And I recommend you do that because going backwards through this, you will feel how rough around the edges this game really is, and you will miss the amount of polish and quality of life stuff that gets added along the way. That said, Mega Man Battle Network, do I recommend it? Absolutely. It is janky, it is rough, it has a terrible translation, and I friggin' love it. This is a very nostalgic game for me. It was the first deck builder I ever played. It was Mega Man as an action RPG, which I loved. It was a game who I was enamored just from the Japanese trailer without any idea what was going on. And this game did not disappoint. But this series only gets started from here. And the future looks bright. Ah. We are definitely in an area we're not supposed to be in. At least not at our level.